Usually when we talk about like a simple glass of water,
Hmm.
we just see the water. It's clear, it's pure, it's the absolute baseline of life. You don't really overthink it.
Right, yeah. It's just water.
Exactly.
Mm.
But if you take just one single, highly concentrated drop of red food coloring
Yeah.
and let it hit the surface, your entire relationship with that glass changes in an instant.
Oh, totally. The dye hits the water, it blooms, and suddenly you don't see the water anymore.
You just see the red.
Yeah, it completely overtakes the glass, coloring every single molecule,
Mhm.
altering your whole perception. The glass is still like 99.9% water, but your brain is completely hijacked by that one fractional drop of dye.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that dynamic, the way a tiny drop of color overrides our perception of the whole, is the exact mechanism we are diving into today.
It's a really powerful analogy.
It is. But we are looking at a very brief but super dense excerpt from a piece titled The Supremacy of Our Shared Humanity. And the author zeroes in on how human beings constantly look down on and disrespect each other based on specific everyday labels.
Yeah, and they argue that we let that drop of food coloring, whether that's a political affiliation or a job title, a tax bracket, whatever it is, completely blind us to the water in the glass.
Right. So today, for this deep dive, our mission is to deconstruct the actual mechanics of why our brains do this. We're going to explore the author's concept of a primary identity and map out the specific mathematical error we make every single time we judge someone based on a label.
And the author isn't just making like a passive sociological observation here. They're diagnosing a very specific, highly destructive habit in our daily cognitive processing.
Because we are built to categorize, aren't we?
We are. The sheer complexity of human existence, processing the full nuanced humanity of 8 billion people, would literally fry our neural circuits. So our brains use heuristics, cognitive shortcuts. We sort the world into neat little boxes.
We see the red dye because the brain thinks it's a more efficient way to process the information. Like, it takes way too much caloric energy to evaluate the water, so we just download a stereotype, attach it to a label, and move on.
Precisely, which is why it feels so automatic. But the text argues that while this might be biologically efficient, it is morally and structurally flawed.
Because we're weaponizing it.
Exactly. When we actively weaponize those categories, when we
Yeah.
use them to disrespect someone, we aren't just noting differences. We are attaching a vertical value system to them. We're building a hierarchy where one really shouldn't exist.
And the text offers a direct counterstructure to that hierarchy. The author argues that beneath all of these, superficial labels we carry around, there is what they call the mother of all identities.
I love that phrasing.
Right. And that identity is simply the fact that we are human.
The choice of the word mother is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, actually. It establishes an undeniable biological and logical sequence.
How do you mean?
Well, think about the physical reality of a mother and a child. A child cannot possibly exist without the mother existing first.
Right.
The mother is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for the child's life.
Okay. Yeah.
So by applying that metaphor, the text argues that our shared humanity is the birthplace of all other possible labels. You cannot be a teacher or a mechanic or a liberal or a conservative unless you are first birthed into existence as a human being.
It's the source code.
Yes. Every other identity is just a secondary software program running on the primary hardware of being human.
That makes every single other identity we possess secondary. It's subordinate. It's a child that has inherited its very capacity to exist from that primary state. But I have to push back a little on this mother of all identities concept, or at least stress test it. If being human is the undeniable mother of all identities, why is it practically the first thing we forget when we interact with a stranger?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Because the way I see it, being human is like this giant umbrella we all stand under. Yet we spend all our time arguing about the colors of the tiny cocktail umbrellas we're holding underneath it.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, the cocktail umbrellas.
Like, why are we so obsessed with the tiny umbrellas when there's a massive one right over our heads?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the problem isn't that we have secondary labels. We need them. The issue arises the moment we use a secondary label to justify devaluing someone else's primary identity.
The moment we mistake the dye for the water.
Yes, we get so obsessed with the secondary identities because they offer us a false sense of distinction and control. The mother identity, our shared humanity, is vast. It's universal. It doesn't really allow for ego.
Because everyone has it.
Right. You can't feel superior to the person next to you in traffic simply for being human because, well, they are human too. The secondary identities are where the ego thrives. They allow us to draw lines in the sand and say, my group is better than your group.
We are totally addicted to the feeling of superiority. That explains why your brain doesn't naturally say, a fellow human navigating the complexities of their finite existence when someone cuts you off.
Huh. No, definitely not.
Your brain says, look at this jerk in the red sports car. The red sports car, the secondary label, the behavior, the aesthetic, becomes their entire identity in your mind.
And that pivot from the universal to the specific brings us to the core mechanism of the text. The author introduces a very specific psychological equation to describe what is actually happening when we make that cognitive pivot and choose to disrespect someone based on a label.
Right, the equation of disrespect.
Yes. The text basically states, if any other identity causes you to look down on or disrespect another person, it inherently means you have deemed that specific identity as more important than the other person's human identity.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because that reframes something very common into something quite severe. We normally think of disrespect as, like, a behavioral issue, a lapse in manners, or just being in a bad mood.
Or personality clash.
But the author is stripping away all the situational excuses. In this framework, disrespect is an active structural demotion of another person's fundamental existence.
It is a literal internal mathematical error. The equation is stark. If you disrespect someone based on a secondary label, you have artificially elevated a subordinate trait above the mother identity.
You've decided the child identity is greater than the mother that birthed it.
Exactly. You are effectively looking at another person and saying, your status as a human being is fundamentally less valuable to me than your status as whatever label I've decided to judge you by.
Okay, let me use an analogy here to map this out. Imagine a VIP club.
Okay, I'm with you.
By judging someone on a lesser identity, we are essentially looking at their ultimate VIP access pass, which is their humanity, and telling them it doesn't matter because they were wearing the wrong shoes.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, the shoes being the lesser identity.
Right, and you have to ask yourself, you, the listener, thinking about your own life, have you ever subconsciously made this mathematical error in your own head when looking at someone from a different background?
We all have. Because the cruelty of that cognitive shortcut is profound when you look at it under a microscope. You aren't just being rude when you roll your eyes at someone with a different political bumper sticker. You are committing an act of internal erasure.
Wow. Internal erasure.
Yeah, you are telling yourself that the very core of their being is insufficient to earn your baseline respect. And notice the word deemed, implied in the author's logic. To deem something requires a judge.
And you've appointed yourself the judge.
Exactly. You've appointed yourself the judge of their existence and ruled that a circumstantial label carries more weight than the biological miracle of their life.
But wait, let me throw a wrench into this equation.
Mhm.
Is this always a mathematical error? What if the secondary identity is inextricably tied to harmful behavior?
Okay. The paradox of tolerance.
Right, let's say the label is serial liar, or, a relentlessly toxic coworker who actively sabotages people. If I look down on that toxic coworker, I'm not making a cognitive error. I'm using pattern recognition to protect myself. Doesn't their shared humanity have limits when their secondary label represents active harm?
That is easily the most difficult friction point in this entire philosophy. But the text challenges us to do something incredibly difficult, to separate the assessment of threat from the denial of human dignity.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, it is entirely possible and frankly necessary to condemn an action. You absolutely fire the embezzler, you protect yourself from the toxic coworker, you hold people accountable.
But you do it without running the demotion equation.
Yes. The moment you strip them of their basic human dignity in your own mind, the moment you view them as a monster or fundamentally less human than you are the one making the cognitive error.
Okay, I see.
The author isn't saying we shouldn't judge actions. They are saying we shouldn't use actions to revoke the title of human. When a society begins to view offenders as non-human, that is historically when the most catastrophic atrocities occur.
So it requires holding two competing thoughts in your head at the exact same time. Your actions are unacceptable, but your existence is undeniable.
Exactly. And that takes an enormous amount of cognitive discipline. It is so much easier for the brain to just let the red dye take over the whole glass.
Right. And our inability to maintain that discipline leads directly to the concluding challenge of the excerpt. The author doesn't just diagnose this mathematical error and leave us with a neat little theory.
No, they drop a massive ethical weight right in our laps.
The text concludes with one direct, profound question. Is there any other identity important than one being a human? It's such a short sentence, but it functions as an absolute trap.
It acts as an ethical mirror. On a purely intellectual level, when we hear that question in a vacuum, the answer feels obvious. We all know what we are supposed to say.
No, of course not.
Right. No identity is more important than being human. But the author isn't offering us a multiple choice quiz where we get points for guessing the morally correct answer. They are framing this as a relentless spotlight on our daily assumptions.
So what does this all mean? Because there is a massive canyon between our intellect and our reality. We know the answer should be no, but if we look back at the very first premise of the text, the observation that we often look down on others based on labels, it proves that humanity's collective actions scream a deafening yes.
The tension there is devastating.
We constantly act as if other identities are more important. How do we close the gap between knowing the right answer to the author's question and actually living it out?
If we genuinely answer no to that final question, then our daily interactions, our urban planning, our economic policies, and our social media habits should reflect the supremacy of our shared humanity. That supremacy shouldn't just be an abstract concept, it should be the operational baseline.
But it's not the operational baseline. And let's talk about why. Right now, there are multi-billion-dollar algorithms specifically designed to ensure we answer yes to the author's question.
Oh, the attention economy. Absolutely.
Social media platforms don't monetize our shared humanity. They don't care about the water. They thrive by stirring the red dye. They find the exact secondary label that triggers your amygdala, and they feed it to you constantly.
The architecture of our digital world is entirely built on exploiting the mathematical error we've been talking about. When a platform shows you a viral video of someone from an opposing political group acting foolishly, it is explicitly inviting you to structurally demote that person's humanity.
It's inviting you to look down on them based on their label.
Right. And the more we practice that demotion online, the more automated it becomes in our physical lives. We're being trained at scale to forget the mother of all identities.
We are outsourcing our cognitive shortcuts to machines that profit from our division. Which makes the author's question, is there any other identity important than one being a human? Not just an ethical mirror, but a test of our own autonomy.
Are we going to let our perception be hijacked by the dye, or are we going to force ourselves to see the water?
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
how do we practically apply this? We've gone from defining the mother of all identities to breaking down the equation of disrespect to grappling with this ultimate question. How do we use this on, like, a Tuesday afternoon?
It requires an active, daily dismantling of the ego. It means intentionally overriding the biological and algorithmic conditioning that tells us to sort, rank, and judge.
Think about the next time you are sitting in a waiting room or commuting to work or scrolling through your feed. When you feel that familiar spike of judgment, when you look at someone's outfit or read a comment they posted and you feel that urge to dismiss them as a lesser person, you have to catch the math error in real time.
You pause and ask yourself, am I artificially elevating a subordinate trait right now? Am I looking at their VIP pass and telling them it doesn't matter because of their shoes?
The simple act of asking the question breaks the automatic nature of the cognitive shortcut. You are manually resetting the equation. You are actively choosing to clear the water.
And it's hard work. It is exhausting to constantly police your own internal hierarchy of labels.
But the alternative is far worse. Because there is a reciprocal nature to this equation that I think we need to leave the listener with. We've talked a lot about the author asking what happens when we judge others. But what happens to our own internal architecture when we do this?
That is the ultimate thread to pull on here.
When we actively choose to elevate a lesser identity in order to disrespect someone else, do we fundamentally shrink our own humanity? If you are pouring food coloring into someone else's glass, you're inevitably staining your own hands.
Precisely. If you operate as the judge who structurally demotes the existence of others, you are fundamentally shrinking your own capacity for human connection. You cannot fully possess and experience the depth of your own humanity while simultaneously denying it in another person.
Wow.
By locking someone else in a box based on a secondary label, you are building the very walls of your own psychological prison. The supremacy of our shared humanity isn't just about how we treat them, it's about preserving us.
That is a staggering realization. The math error doesn't just demean the target, it degrades the calculator.
It really does. It is the ultimate test of human maturity. Moving past the easy divisions of our cocktail umbrellas and accepting the profound, undeniable reality that we are all birthed from the exact same source.
Keep that equation in your mind as you navigate the world this week. Watch how your brain tries to sort people into hierarchies and challenge yourself to reset the math. The mother of all identities is always there, underneath the noise, waiting to be recognized. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into how we perceive each other. Keep questioning your own assumptions, keep looking for the water in the glass, and as always, keep exploring the world around you.
Thanks for listening.